There were 4 teenage guys who were the best of friends. One night, they decided to drive out and visit a haunted tunnel they had heard about. Local people sometimes visited the tunnel to test their courage. The guys didn't believe in ghosts, and they wanted to take a picture of themselves in the tunnel so they could show their friends. That night, the 4 young men set out in a car and drove up a steep and lonely mountain road. Eventually, they reached the tunnel and parked outside. According to the urban legend they had heard, if you stood at the mouth of the tunnel and repeated a certain phrase, a ghost was supposed to appear. Together, they stood in front of the tunnel, illuminated by the car's headlights, and said, come out, wherever you are," over and over again. Then they waited, but nothing happened. "Just like I thought," said one of them. "There's no ghost." "Yeah, it's just a stupid legend," said another guy, trying not to show his fear. "Come on, this is boring. Let's take a picture and go home." The guys gathered at the mouth of the tunnel and left the camera on the hood of the car. The timer ran down and it took a photo of them. Then, they all climbed back into the car. However, the guy who was sitting in the driver's seat didn't turn on the ignition. The others waited for a few moments in silence. Then, they grew impatient. "Hey, why aren't we moving?" shouted a guy from the back seat. The driver didn't respond. He just sat there. "Come on, man, what's wrong with you?" said his friends. The dude in the driver's seat turned slowly and faced his friends. His face was pale and small droplets of sweat were rolling down his cheeks. "Guys, we're friends, right?" he said. His voice sounded like it was shaking. "Of course we are," answered the others. "Best friends. You guys would always stick by me, right?" he asked. "Sure we would," they replied. "Through thick and thin. If I was in some kind of trouble, you guys would never leave me, right?" he said. "No way," they said. "You can always rely on us." The young man in the driver's seat smiled weakly and mopped his brow. There were tears in his eyes. In a faint whisper he said, then, "Look at my feet." The other guys exchanged puzzled glances, and their eyes slowly moved down towards his feet. 2 white hands were coming up through the floor of the car. The long, gnarled fingers were tightly gripping the ankles of the young man in the driver's seat. For a few moments, his friends stared in shock. Then, suddenly, they started screaming in terror. They scrambled to open the car doors and fled as fast as their legs would carry them, leaving their friend alone in the car. The guys didn't stop running until they came to the bottom of the hill. Stopping to catch their breath, they looked at each other with horrified faces. After a while, they cautiously made their way back to the entrance of the tunnel. The car was still sitting there, the headlights illuminating the tunnel, but the young man in the driver's seat was gone. He had vanished, and they never found him. Today, his whereabouts are unknown. Do you ever get that nagging feeling that you've forgotten something? You know that feeling when you've left something behind, but you can't remember what it was. It was just after 6 when I left the office and walked to the bus stop. As I stood there, waiting for the bus to arrive, I had a strange sense of unease. I felt as if I had left something important behind, but I couldn't think what it was. Maybe it's nothing, I tried to assure myself, but something was nagging at me. I felt like going back to check, but I was too tired. I just wanted to get home. When the bus came, I piled in with the other passengers. As usual, all the seats were taken. I clung to the handrail as the bus lurched back and forth. I bumped into the man behind me and said, "I'm sorry," but he just looked away. More and more, I felt that I had left something important at the office. The farther the bus carried me from the office, the more certain I became of it. I went over the day in my mind. I thought about my creepy boss staring at me all day. I thought about the other secretaries gossiping about how he had a crush on me. I thought about the letters he told me to post. Had I forgotten them? Of course not. I thought about the meetings I had to schedule. Had I scheduled them? Of course. I racked my brain for some clue as to what I had forgotten. I told myself that I would feel better when I got home. The uneasy feeling wouldn't leave me. I got off the bus at my usual stop, but when I came to the lane that led to my house, I finally gave in. It's no use, I thought. This will be nagging at me all night. I have to go back to the office and see what it was that I overlooked. As tired as I was, I made my way back to the bus stop, back to the office. I was just doing this to put my mind at ease. As I got off the bus, I heard the clock strike 7. I walked quickly up the side street to the office and turned the key in the door. Quickly, I ran up the stairs. When I opened the office door, I suddenly stopped in my tracks. To my horror, I recognized what it was I had left behind. It was me. My body was lying strangled on the floor. When I was 7 years old, my father got into a serious car accident. He was badly injured and he was in a coma for 2 weeks. During that time, I kept catching brief glimpses of him wandering around the house looking confused. Every time I saw him, I would tell my mom, but she just dismissed it as my overactive imagination. When my father finally recovered and came out of the coma, my mom told him about the sightings. My father listened quietly, then asked me to leave the room so he and my mother could talk. I had no idea what they were talking about. Years later, when I was 18, my dad sat me down and finally revealed the secret he had been keeping from me. He said that at the time, he didn't want to scare me, but while he had been in the coma, he remembered wandering around our house, looking for everyone and trying to figure out why the house was empty. He said he would randomly catch brief glimpses of me standing there, staring at him. I still get goosebumps thinking about it. My friend was playing rugby at a local pitch, and it was his job to lock up the changing rooms. By the time he'd finished, it was dark outside. He started walking home, and he noticed a figure standing at the other end of the field. He thought it was just some guy walking through the park, but then the figure started walking across the field towards him. My friend just stood there looking, and the figure started speeding up until it was actually running towards him at full speed. At this point, my friend was a bit freaked out. That was when the worst part happened. The figure suddenly seemed to drop forward onto all fours, and it was still running at full speed. It was wearing a coat or cloak that was trailing behind it. My friend turned and ran as fast as he could towards the car park. When he got to his car and jumped in, he turned back to look at the field, but there was nothing there. After my friend described this to me, I actually couldn't sleep for 2 nights straight. He told another friend of mine, who used to walk her dog at the same park, and neither of us has gone back there since.